Vincent Zhou.
Good morning, everyone. I want to thank the distinguished speakers before me, and I want to thank all of you here for being present at this incredible event. Today, I would like to talk about success and my perspective and my definition of success. What is it? What is success? Well, Merriam-Webster defines success as a measure of succeeding. Great. That helps a lot. Well, then what is succeeding? Well, Merriam-Webster says that to succeed means to attain a desired object or end. Many define success specifically as the attainment of wealth, honors, eminence, and the like. We all know that success is so much more than just money in the bank or a medal around your neck. I scoured the internet and consulted many dictionaries trying to find an adequate definition, but I couldn't find one. So I set out to discover for myself what success was. My early attempts were questionable. I stacked boxes on top of chairs, on top of tables to reach the top of the bookshelf where my parents kept my Legos. I also wore a homemade name tag to the YMCA, and I tried to quantify my fame based on how many people looked at the name tag. My later attempts involved the Olympics. Yet, after each of these things, I found that I was still searching. Clearly, it was going to take a lot more to find an answer than just chasing tangible outcomes. You see, I grew up in Palo Alto, the heart of the Silicon Valley. I remember passing by garages, which now headquarter global tech companies, and I remember thinking to myself how I plan to achieve that sort of greatness one day. While I pranced around the YMCA with my name tag, other kids scored perfect SATs before their first birthday, and by the time they could walk, they were already coding at Google. The high standards and breakneck pace of my environment taught me competitiveness right off the bat. By the time I was 5, I was a tryhard in everything. I brought my fiery ambition to the kindergarten classroom, to soccer practice, and also to wall climbing at home, which unfortunately had the side effect of property destruction. But to remedy this and discourage me from flying around the house, my parents put me into sports to make me tired so I could fall asleep and dream of flying instead. That's how I discovered figure skating. True to form, in beginner group classes, I was already zooming around the rink, too excited to follow the instructors. Consequently, I failed my first skating tests, so my mom decided to put me into private lessons to learn discipline. With a proper channel to direct my ambition, I began improving rapidly, outpacing other skaters 3 times my age and size. And soon my mom realized that even the Silicon Valley environment would not hold me and my plans for greatness. We came up with a crazy plan. I was going to quit regular school and move 400 miles away to train under a world-class coach. She would quit her career and support me full-time. The rest of my family would not move with us. We would drive back home every weekend so as to retain some semblance of a family life, over 1,000 miles of driving a week. Comfort and stability were just afterthoughts. So what did I think about this? My mom asked. About sacrificing education, friends, our family life, her career, basically our entire livelihoods for some impossible Olympic dream when I hadn't even accomplished anything yet that would suggest I was remotely capable of achieving such things? Well, little 8-year-old me turned to my mom and said, "My heart is with skating." And that line has made all the difference in the world. And so I packed my bags and disappeared into the sunset, never looking back. This path I chose to walk was a maelstrom of glory and pain and everything in between. At age 10, I won my first of 3 consecutive national titles. However, being good was not good enough. I wanted more. And so determined to fulfill my potential, I confidently pushed my limits. But I soon learned the hard way that there are some things you can only learn the hard way. My intense training resulted in a major injury that I underwent surgery for, at age 12. This left me bedridden for months, but even worse, it brought my budding career to a screeching halt. The crippling depression that followed took me out of competition for 2 years and changed me as a person for good. The trophies on my wall were replaced with obscure quotes of melancholia, and my favorite colors turned from bright neons to dark, muted tones of solitude. By 13, I knew what it was to have the sun rise and set on my lone, unmoving figure day after day, slowly being consumed by the dark void of hopelessness. Although my injury healed, my mental health did not. Skating, which once was the source of my joy and passion, had transformed into the source of my pain. Distraught and disillusioned, I quit. I returned home to try reintegrating myself into regular school life, but I felt so out of place. For months, I languished in empty-handed soul-searching, waiting for time to heal my wounds, which eventually it did. My animosity towards skating slowly faded into a numb, aching acceptance. And one summer afternoon, a friend invited me to skate with them on an empty public session with nobody watching. I said, why not? And so I went in with no expectations. An hour later, I was trying triples like I had never left. In doing so, I began to tear down the walls of inhibition between myself and skating that this ordeal had erected. With a single step forward in the face of uncertainty, an entire realm of opportunities opened up in front of me. This is a lesson that I learned early on that has repeatedly made itself evident to this day. This catalyzed another period of meteoric growth, like a smothered flame brought back to life by a serendipitous wind that seemed to have my name written all over it. I moved all over the country searching for a fresh start and eventually found my way to Colorado Springs. Over the next few years, I poured everything I had into my craft, trying to make up for the time that I had lost. I distinctly remember one night at the Olympic Training Center. I had gone there to work out after a long day of on-ice training. Over the course of my workout, other athletes came, completed their routine, and left. And finally, the front desk receptionist closed down for the day. But she forgot one thing. She forgot about me upstairs. So there I was, sweat pouring down my face as I threw myself at my reps with a passion so intense one might mistake it for insanity. The lights were turned off and the sun went down, and I just kept going in the dark, not even caring. The singular thought in my head was that this next repetition could be the difference between me making the Olympic team or not. That insanity paid off. In 2018, at age 17, I made my first Olympic team. A year later, I won my first world medal. And yet, I still wasn't satisfied. Joining the most elite group of skaters in the world was proof to myself that this was the path I was meant to walk, which only strengthened my resolve for the 2022 Olympics. So, as the 2022 season rolled around, everything was going right. I was in the best shape of my life, winning major competitions against the best skaters in the world. There was a tangible buzz around me as a serious threat for the Olympic podium. Champion, even. It felt like my ultimate dream was on the verge of realization. I qualified for the Olympic team convincingly and was off to Beijing. I could taste what I thought was success in the air. The night before my individual event, I was calmly preparing myself, visualizing the moment that would define my career, when the US Olympic Committee called me and said my COVID test that morning came back positive. I didn't even know how to react to that information. I just stiffly packed my suitcases and went off to the quarantine facility. You know when something so terrible happens that you just leave reality and your body starts moving on its own, separate from your mind, because you simply have no heuristic for how to deal with such a situation? That's what I experienced. After the initial shock, then denial set in. I felt an overwhelming cognitive dissonance where I knew I was supposed to be doing my final competition prep, but for some reason, I was standing in this isolation room, far from the Olympic Village. I had to keep snapping myself back to the reality in front of my eyes, because every time I closed them, it was to do my visualizations in my room in the Olympic Village. At some point, I tried to open my phone and film myself vocalizing my thoughts as a way to force myself to process. But I ended up sitting in front of the camera for over 2 hours because every time I tried to talk, only broken sounds came out. The next morning, I jerked awake a few minutes before my alarm would have been if I were competing. I instinctively snapped into full-on competition mode, adrenaline flowing, ready to go, ready to make my dreams a reality. And then I noticed that the bumps on the ceiling looked wrong, different from the ones in the Olympic Village. And then I remembered where I was. That moment was like thousands of knives tearing at my insides, wave after wave of pain just slamming into my chest. There was an outpouring of love and support from my family and friends, my team, and hundreds of thousands, millions of internet strangers. But at no fault of theirs, I still felt utterly alone. On the third day of my quarantine, the final results from what would have been my event came in. Those results basically confirmed that I could very well have medaled, and that was like the tsunami that rushes in after an earthquake. It nearly destroyed me. I tried to tell myself that this moment would not define me, and I should be proud of everything else I accomplished. But I couldn't find solace in any of those things because it felt like I had just lost my entire life's work in the blink of an eye. My coaches tried to refocus me towards what was next, the World Championships in 5 weeks, the final competition possibly of my career, my one and only chance at redemption. So I tried to prepare, but it was useless. The validation of my journey that I had felt only days prior was gone. And so alone in my isolation room with nothing but my own thoughts for company, the days passed in a hazy blur of misery. When I finally tested negative and was released from that room a week later, I felt simultaneously empowered and also crushed. I was happy to breathe fresh air again, but happy? Who was I kidding? I had just lost the one thing I had given my whole life to. Any happiness felt undeserved and misplaced. I said hello to my teammates, hugged them, and smiled, but it was just a performance, and I was good at performing. I returned home with only 4 weeks until the World Championships. Before I even ate a proper meal, I was already back on the ice. I was broken and lost, and I just instinctively resorted to the only thing I knew how to do, which was to immerse myself in my work and lose my pain amidst the effort and physicality of training. But my body wouldn't function. It was like trying to run upright in a pool. The next morning, waking up in my own bed back home in Colorado made me realize that what happened in Beijing could not and would not ever change. I suddenly felt this overwhelming sense of loss, almost like the death of a loved one. But underneath that was something far more terrifying, a feeling that I recognized immediately. For the first time in 8 years, I stood face to face with the yawning chasm of depression once again. I felt a strong animalistic gut instinct telling me to fight back with everything I had. But my head was telling me, Vincent, you have nothing. My whole life had been a steep uphill battle already, and I had just slipped down to the bottom after standing one step from the summit. And this was going to be my hardest battle yet. I remember trying to approach my skates to go to the rink, but just the sight of my skates was so painful that I physically recoiled. I sat down in a corner somewhere and cried until my arms went numb and my vision went blurry. At some point, my mom sat down next to me and we cried together. She'd never done that, ever. She told me it was okay to withdraw from Worlds and that she would understand. My mom, the strongest woman I've ever known, who had unwaveringly drilled tenacity into me since I was a kid, whose word was law, told me it was okay to give up. And so this idea of withdrawing festered. Going to Worlds meant almost certain failure because I wouldn't have been able to train at all in the 6 weeks prior, and that failure would only make things worse, 10 times worse than they already were. On the other hand, if I didn't take that risk and I just withdrew, I knew that I would never sleep soundly again if I allowed myself to not even try in the most critical moment. I would have to live the rest of my life having left skating on the bitterest of notes without any closure. And obviously, this felt like a lose-lose situation. I had a sudden reality check when my mom started planning a vacation in Yosemite the week the competition was supposed to take place. I knew I would never find peace within myself if I willingly let a 1% chance of redemption slip through my fingers, even if the other 99% carried dire consequences. So as a result, I chose to compete, hanging on to nothing but a tenuous thread of hope. When I stepped on the plane to France, I all of a sudden realized I'd just done the hardest part, which was deciding to trust that tenuous thread of hope to hold my weight. I suddenly felt liberated. I didn't know if I was falling, floating, or flying, and it didn't matter. All that mattered was that I took a step in the face of uncertainty, and that was my victory. That was my success. And just like years ago, when I took that step, a whole new realm of possibilities opened up. I remember for the first time in years, reveling in my rediscovery of freedom and speed across the ice. Every edge, every jump, every movement was pure joy. I finally learned in those moments to let go of my fear and trust myself. Nearly losing what I lived and breathed my whole life and then rediscovering it made me treasure it more than ever. After some of the best practices of my career, I started to realize that I had a chance in this competition. It had seemed impossible only days prior, but now it was sitting there just beyond my fingertips, almost daring me to believe in it. And that's exactly what I did. I started to believe. Competition day came, and I had never felt so light before, so present. Some subconscious part of my brain was already so proud that I'd made it there. It made me feel like I'd already won. Riding on that high and feeding off the electric atmosphere in the arena, I skated my heart out. Because I was first in the final group, I had to wait for my competitors to skate after me one by one. After an hour of waiting that felt more like an eternity, the standings finally came up. And when I saw that I'd made the podium, I must have blacked out or something from the surge of emotions. The last 6 weeks just hit me all at once. And on top of it all was this surreal materialization of my dreams that I thought I had just lost for good. During the medal ceremony, I looked out across the darkened arena, trying to absorb the full impact of this medal. More than just a surface achievement, it carried the weight of every single success and failure, both large and small, over the years. Images replayed in my head of that fiery little kid who stopped at nothing to be the best. I saw all the long car rides into unknown sunsets, all the broken down skates piled up in a corner of my garage, all the dried tears on forgotten pages of a diary. In the years of unbridled passion I poured into this sport, I'd always felt so alone, so consumed by the solitude of reaching for the stars. But then I thought of my dad and my mom somewhere in the audience, and I knew that I had never been alone. I remembered how together we dove straight into uncharted waters with nothing but a dream and my love for skating. People typically think of love as a blissful thing, nurturing and freeing, but it's not always like that. My love for skating was a white-hot bolt of resolute ferocity, full of pain, sacrifice, and hardship. But all of those things drove me to stay the course, and that absolute commitment to what I loved was what ended up defining my greatest successes. Oh, that word again, success. Okay, well, so let's revisit the question. What is success? Well, hopefully the stories that I shared with you today illustrate the fact that success is so much more than just attainment of an end. There is no singular definition. Success is to persevere through failure and hardship. Success is when you put your values and what you love first. Success is acting with purpose and doing things that bring you meaning and make you happy. Yes, that's right. Success is doing what makes you happy. When you get out of bed in the morning, ask yourself, why am I doing this? The only way you'll find success is if your answer is that you love what you do, you're passionate about it, or it brings you fulfillment. Otherwise, any success you achieve will just feel empty. A big part of success lies in proactively identifying and benchmarking it. When you engage in realistic and mindful goal setting every day, every week, month, and year, success then is no longer just about big achievements that sound good on paper. Instead, it becomes something that happens every day. It's a habit, a way of thinking, a way of living. And that's a tangible lesson we can carry with us all in the pursuit of sports, education, career, and beyond. It's a lesson that I'm still learning myself. I spent many years trying to define success in terms of medals and titles, but that was always going to be a losing game. Now, I've retooled my pursuit of success to encompass what makes me feel alive, what speaks to me and engages my core values, and what I love. That is what truly matters in life for each and every one of us. Thank you. So this is a flag, a Beijing 2022 Olympic flag signed by the organizers of this event. I just want to say thank you so much to the organizers and to all of you for having me. It's an absolute honor to be here. And thank you to Tsinghua for their support and for enabling all of us to come together. So thank you.
I think Vincent is an embodiment of Wen Xidong. Do you agree? And Vincent's mother is right among us. Can you show us?
Yes, please come up to the stage, Mom.
Thank you for
please
setting such a high example and such a high bar for all of the first generation. Please welcome 计算机系86级师姐。
This is the woman who's single-handedly responsible for all of my success. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much to my mom, my dad, my parents, all of my supporters, everyone who has been a part of my journey. It's been incredible. And now I want to pay it forward to all of you guys.